starting a dairy business originating from Munger for ITC. Something that we started as a solution to dealing with a HR issue in a more humane manner, in a manner which cognizes for the local dynamics, today has translated itself into a business opportunity. And there's an investment, there's a whole dairy plant that is coming up. And for some of the people who sort of did not get the right lively opportunities, their families will now get one more round of opportunity. Thought I'll just share those two.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for that. Suresh, you talked about the fact that the contribution to business, HR cannot be delineated from the business itself. Some of your experiences with GVK, would you like to reflect upon the whole piece about scale and what kind of business growth phase you're talking about and the implications it has on HR capability?
Good, Dilip. So I can give a real-time example. Maybe 22 months back, my CEO name is Mani Kantipudi. He was prior to joining GVK, but he was heading Intel India, Intel chip company India. So we both were sitting after the board meeting. He was, obviously our board meetings are very intense. That's what, very intense, very, after coming back, he was saying, board is asking Suresh, they're not at all happy with the way we are growing, the percentage we are growing. And they are challenging me, saying, no, so what is this kind of a growth? We're not at all happy. And you need to come back to us, how you are going to grow beyond the market, beyond the competition. So he's not in that kind of a positive upbeat mode, but first thing is I need to make him comfortable. And very sharp person I ever interacted, my CEO. So immediately we had a meaningful conversation. So Mani, fundamentally we need to understand now how our business is currently growing in an existing business, single digit, okay? What is that we need to do to accelerate from a single digit to double digit? Okay, the first question started, a meaningful conversation. So we started talking, okay, we don't have one solution called formulation solution. So by starting it, existing business can go up. So then second question is our competitor in China called WuXi. It's a more than $500 million company that they are growing much faster. Then I started asking a reflective question, how WuXi is growing money. He said, they provide integrated solution. What is integrated is, we used to sell 2 products, they sell it as a one solution, not sell as each individual as a product. No? So a solution, integrated approach. So then what is stopping us to sell integrated solution money? Why don't we think about it? Will that accelerate our growth from single digit to double digit? He said, seems to be good, but our leadership team is ready to work as a collaborative team to give an integrated. That can be worked out money. I'm there, I will support you, just think about it. But board will not be happy even you do this, it will grow at about maybe 13%, 14%. They're asking much more than that. Then what is the other capabilities needed to grow at that rate? Then we identified that the capabilities required to grow at that rate is the market needs are changing. We take a tablet, which is a chemical substance. Now it is going to change to biosimilar market, like antibodies and that kind of new technology is coming to fight new diseases. He said, that is growing, Suresh. Then why can't we enter that money? But in India, you don't get any scientist who can do that. Very few are there. But we as a services company, very difficult to attract. Why don't we think about something else? It's a meaningful conversation. Just know then we came back today to see that we engaged a consultant called Universal Consulting who did the project for us. And the story is now, in an organic way, we started formulation unit, we started a office in Japan, okay, set up in Japan to accelerate our market share in Japan. We set up an office in Netherlands to increase our market share in Europe. These are all organically. At the meantime, we acquired a company in US called Regen Biosciences 5 months back, 5 to 6 months back, which has approximately 40 postdoctorates and PhDs who understand these biosimilars. And just a story, if you reflect back, some meaningful conversations are very much required, and CEO need to share with someone, and someone need to be a sounding board for him. And if he can give that platform of sounding board and provide his thoughts in the right direction, the growth will come. And the story is today, last financial year, we ended with 33% growth and 62% growth in our EBITDA. Significant growth, which not happened to GVK Boy in last 6-7 years. So to answer your point, the boy is, you can sustain the existing business by increasing the market share. The HR practices, HR function responsibilities, HR person capabilities are very, very different. If you want to grow the business organically, the strategies, what approaches I use to grow that is identify how do you set up the office in abroad? Who is the best salesperson our competition is having it? How can I make two scientists, great scientists work together as an integrated solution? Can I incentivize salespeople and these integrated services so that they work together? That's for organic growth. Then coming to inorganic growth, is HR is capable of doing due diligence of a company which is situated in California, and who has that capability? How do I ensure that we acquire a company and later we have capability to integrate and grow the company? So both HR capability model for organic growth, inorganic model are slightly different than, not both are not the same. That's what my experience.
Oh, that's great. I really, interesting point of the different capability models for inorganic versus organic growth, business growth. And that probably has implications for some elements around organization structures. And, if an organization has both the possibilities, so do they need to be structured differently? Samit, I remember you touching upon scale for growth and organization structure as a key aspect to consider. Would you like to share your experiences of how you're dealing with scale, and what's the role of structure and what HR does to structure? Your reflections on that.
Sure. If you really look at typically, especially the environment that I come from, these are service businesses, right? And in service businesses, and similarly in most of the IT organizations, growth and your ability to scale the business with various skills has to be fast, nimble-footed, and rapid. So if you really look at it from my experience, right, if you look at Genpact, say the year 2005, we were fundamentally a company catering for one single client, GE. Today, 7, 8, 9 years down the line, it's diversified. We've got about 800 clients today and a global footprint of about 65,000 odd people. So what was true as an organization structure and the requirements of that probably then is not true now. First of all, organization structure then was to operate as center of excellences. So you had a group of people with similar skills operating in their own silos, delivering to customer need. As we moved on, and so has many companies, if you look at competition around, you'd see that they've actually evolved and they have moved into structuring themselves in industry verticals. And industry verticals obviously meant that people needed to understand the domains of those industries other than their key domain. So somebody could be, say, a great guy in finance and accounting, but does he understand, therefore, how does finance and accounting happen, for example, in the oil and gas sector? And in oil and gas sector, the accounting happens differently because somebody needs to understand how probably hydrocarbon accounting, which is a skill, happens there. So how do you build the organization first by industry verticals is a big change. And secondly, what happens is that HR has to ensure that the skills of the people are in tune with that organization structure that you're building. Secondly, as you get into that verticalized mode, which you call this sort of an organization structure, the HR manager's role completely transforms. He is not responsible for a region then. He is fundamentally responsible, cutting across the globe wherever your organization is doing delivery. So therefore, he has to first learn how to work virtually across the globe with varied people, various groups, and probably his team members who are present across the globe. Second, more importantly, he has to understand the policy and nuances and differences which are there across the globe. You suddenly can't be going ahead and implementing, say, an India practice of how we go ahead and hire, how we go ahead and fire talent, etc., in another location or another country. So I think, you know, it's a dramatic shift from the organization structure standpoint. Secondly, when you build the structure, you have to understand that what's your organization structure going to be fueled by? Means, what's the evolution stage? Is it going to be a buy model? Is it going to be a build model? How much, what percentage of talent do you actually want to grow internally within the organization to support that sort of skill? Do you have the time to actually go ahead and build that talent, or do you have to buy the talent externally from the market? So how do you strategize and give that input, you know, to what Suresh was saying, to your business leaders, CEOs, etc., so that the decisioning is very strategic. And then, of course, understanding nuances. I can give you an example. Means we acquired a engineering services company which basically supports, you know, building of the airframes of Airbus 380s. This is a company which is beyond just services. It is fundamentally into creative thinking, modeling. They understand how a thrust force is required when a plane takes off the ground. Now, typically, a performance management system of a large company could be driven by bell curve, could be driven by, you know, you want to go ahead and say, you know, identify your people basis performance. We had to rethink at that point of time, when we look at and acquire that sort of talent set within our overall organization, that does that really suit the need? Or do you want to promote creative thinking in that particular group to build in that ecosystem? So I think as you grow, you have to think and wear a headset, which is ever changing. Change management of an HR leader, I think, is a key talent which is required. And if you are unable to understand those nuances, you will actually be implementing wrong practices, policies, and technologies across the diverse groups that you own.
Thanks for that perspective. You know, so just as a midway check on what we have discussed so far, the very specific aspect of organic versus inorganic, you know, play, some capabilities which are emerging for the HR function around change management, then capabilities which can almost shape businesses. You know, Prabhakar talked about the dairy business, which is almost evolving because HR was providing a solution for something else. Then creating stickiness through a focus on value proposition, which Kiranmay talked about. Also, you know, the whole changing role of HR within the changing organization. You gave an example from GE. What I would like to do is that, you know, my own experience and some of the work that we have been doing around research globally, around what it takes to work in a matrix. So I just wanted to read out some of those elements because I hear that coming across. Is that the competencies for working in a matrix is all about enterprise perspective, something with Suresh you've talked about, you know, that you need to know the business, you need to understand the business, and that perspective is very important. A cross-functional perspective, so knowing what R&D needs to do with marketing and therefore what HR needs to contribute. A customer perspective, which strongly comes across, you know, elements of all across, all the 4 examples are there. Then self-management, listening with respect, matrix influencing. So you talked about, Samit, you just mentioned that HR needs to operate in a virtual environment and work across globally, not just focused on the geography. If this is what it is sounding like, isn't what you are saying about HR more about matrixed? You know, the matrix is a reality for HR. And therefore, what are the challenges that HR is dealing with as a function in operating in a matrix environment, and what capabilities or what nuances does it require? Is it only an HR leadership responsibility? Prabhakar, your views on that?
I think when we're now looking at matrix, to me it's not HR or leadership or anything. Today's business reality, and especially when you're working in multiple geographies or multiple verticals, it has to become part and parcel of the DNA of the organization. And therefore, any system or any process that we are looking at, we really need to see, are we keeping that matrix organization in perspective? Very simple things like, relate to my own agribusiness, we have the branch structure to sort of facilitate geographies. But within a branch structure, you have pockets of expertise, trading, marketing, etc., who report into a center of excellence. Very simple things like who should be the first appraiser and second appraiser. Very often we sort of do it very casually. अरे यार ठीक है, branch manager को बोल दो first appraiser होने के लिए, or somebody else can be this thing. No application of mind in terms of what is the logic of first appraisal, what is the logic of second appraisal, etc. So how do we get into each element which impacts the people who are operating in matrix is probably the role of HR here. The second important thing I see in a matrix organization, therefore, is how glued are you to the ground realities? Because typically in a matrix organization, because there are some differences, things can fall between stools, or it is lost amongst the crevices. So the HR role in a matrix organization, in my view, is having eyes and ears to the ground to pick up if there are any struggles that the line people are having in terms of dealing with matrix structure, and then stepping in at the appropriate level and forum to sort of remove those issues or differences. I would look at it, this too, as very, very significant for HR in a matrix context.
Thanks. Kirmai, your viewpoint around this whole piece of creating stickiness, and you talked about elements of inorganic growth, which requires a very different kind of a rigor. Now, if you were to look at the elements of collaboration or enterprise perspective, how does that shift between an incremental organic and a large scale, very significant inorganic transformation?
Sure. Thanks, Debu. I'll have to really talk to you about an experience in the organization I'm currently in, which is Advanced Micro Devices. It's a Fortune 500 company which is in the business of making chips. Now, 2 years ago, there have been a huge storm which shook the company. We were on the verge of bankruptcy. So what happened? A company which has been thriving well, a 40-year giant working in this space, which has always been at the Fortune 500 list, suddenly on the verge of bankruptcy. And it goes back to what Samit was mentioning, org structuring, restructuring, you mentioned. So it's a huge, tough situation for everyone involved, the leadership team. The board fired the CEO. Okay, it's a board meeting, and even before the board met, the first thing they did was fire the CEO. So huge, I mean, when you look at the implications in terms of the stickiness, employees, confusion, lot of rumors, grapevine gets stronger, and you really need to go back and talk to employees. And you're talking about 60 countries where the company has its global footprint and key talent out there, and you're a niche player. What do? So there's a hurdle, obviously. Whatever worked cannot work, and you have to do it quickly. There has to be a turnaround. You have to get the buy-in from the stakeholders, the investors, and so on and so forth. So a couple of bold call-outs, and that's where there are two pieces as a strategy which came in. One is protect what you have. It could be your cash cow, something which is still working well. So protect that. Protect that market, protect that particular product line. Attack. The other piece is you have to walk away from some products which are not yielding you, which is the PC market. All of you know what happened. The storm was smartphones and tablets cannibalized the market space we were in, right? So, and the kind of growth trajectory which tablets or the small form factors as we would call in the industry, that was not anticipated. I mean, you have industry pundits, as you would say, so many working and doing the analytics and so on. But the growth trajectory, the way it hit, nobody even realized. It's almost as if you were caught napping. It happened with such rapidity. A $5 billion company turnover, suddenly you know you're moving towards more like you're losing 1.5 billion. That's the situation. So your OPEX is much higher than what you're actually bringing in as revenues. So that is the kind of criticality we were in. So the protect and attack blueprint was framed. It's easier said than done. You all know that. So the other piece is your organization, the way it's structured. Now, who would be at the helm of affairs? This is a company, for 40 years, it has been investing in the core engineering because that's your competence, that's the knowledge industry. They are the ones who actually bring out the next generation chip. So they are your core employees. Now, what happened? Huge, bold move where you said, okay, R&D is important, but actually we need engineers, not just working on something. They might bring in chips which are of no value from a market or a consumer perspective. So you need the business. Business is the economic driver. For you to first sustain, you have to get your head above the waters. Then you will have to build scale. So given this, we brought in suddenly the whole org structure changed. We brought in the P&L, accountability, and you built the business units. Till then it was all R&D and engineering was a strong pillar, leading even the business, separated those. Brought in leaders who would have the business and customer facing, understanding the economics of it, what products sell, what don't. So that was a major shift. So we will have to work on the change management. Acquisition happened around the same time. It's an investment for the future. Then another interesting thing which we tabled was, hey, we have great engineers, brilliant talent who are very innovative and creative. Let's tap into that instead of we creating a product and then, because it's a huge gestation period, just as it takes for a human child to take birth, 9 months. You won't believe it. It's 9 to 12 months for a chip to be designed. And then for it to again get into the fab and fabricated and come out, another 12 months. That means 2 years is the period. By then the industry has changed or the ecosystem changed. It's too long. You can't change all that now. But what you could change is, we turned on our head and said 1.6 billion deficit. That's one. The other is, no investor has the confidence now to give you more for you, because R&D requires a lot of investment. That's when we said, why don't we now partner, talk to some of these OEMs and others and say, we will create your product, you put in money. It's a totally different model which we've never worked on. So what happened was, today how many of you or somebody in your home must be playing on a Xbox or a PSP4 or a Nintendo's Wii U? All of them are powered by our technology. Every single gaming console in the world you can name. So globally, so in a 2-year period, you can see what we could do from a strategy, change management, thinking differently, and calling it a shot. That's a huge one. So you went to Microsoft, you went to Sony, you went to Nintendo and said, hey, why don't we partner? Otherwise we are dead. Every single one said, oh my God, we can't anticipate AMD going dead, because what happens? There is a monopoly coming in. One of the key players moving out would mean their prices will increase. There would be another player who would rule the whole market. So this is how certain dynamics would work. And today, we've got that this business is giving us to the tune of 1 billion. So we've already made up for the losses, and very quickly, because that's a huge agility. But what happened? All this seems good on the paper, or when you go to the investors, when you go to the Wall Street, right? But what we had to do internally to shift this around, lot of org restructuring, leaders have to leave, some who don't buy in, they're not one, because They have been with AMD for 20 years, say. Some of them find it hard saying, hey, we are in the x86 world. This is what we have done. I can't think about doing it on a different architecture. Oh, this is dog's day for AMD. So it's very difficult for them to really shift, move. So when you have that, we were also very clear and say, all right, if that's the case, let's part ways. So we talk about reduction in workforces as if it's something very negative, and it's always from a business or economics. Not necessarily. That goes back to, is the employee really happy doing what he or she needs to do? They're not on board with a shifting strategy or a different dynamic. So they need to go and find their mark elsewhere. And we had those conversations, and very clearly, those who are not on board had to leave. And it's done with grace and dignity, and not yanking them out or uprooting them overnight. Similarly, those who are buying in, and fresh insights and fresh blood brought in. So that merger and that change management and integration of talent, the new leaders coming in. And there's also, I'll take one more. I'm sure you all heard of Marcus Buckingham, right? I'm bringing him in the context. We also had to pull in the leadership especially and start working on their mindsets and help them really change quickly so that they will be able to move the troops along. One of the key things we've done is we've done an assessment of the entire team across the globe, put them all together, and we said, can you tell us how does this look like? So that's the health diagnostics we've done of the leadership and their mind frame. Because they will mention something on collaboration. Now, the need of the hour is we have teams all over, and it's like a baton passing. It's not like a sprint, each one on his or her own. I need to do something, and it has to pass to Prabhakar's team, and Prabhakar's team has to pass it to Samit's team, and Samit's team has to pass it to Suresh's. It goes in a tango. So to make that, because there are dependencies for us to move quickly and get this piece out. Given this, collaboration is a key term. When we made an assessment, can you believe what you have found? It's an innovative company, so you have a lot of creative engineers, as I said. Each one is so strong and opinionated. Our standout assessment, the diagnostics clearly told us, we are like Mustangs, hybrid horses. What does it mean? They're great, brilliant. Each one can run on its own and win something. But together, wow. It's going to be difficult. You can't rein them all in and ask them to move in one particular direction. So we know what the problem statement is. So it boils down to, what did we do? We talked about the challenge we had sitting at the table along with the business leader is, what good looks like? If we have to reach there, what does good looks like, right? Where are we today and where do we have to go? So we got that. So what problem are we trying to solve? We need to understand that. So now we have these assessments, these levers we would use. So it's very obvious to all of us, oh my God, we cannot have this behavior if each leader is going to act like a warlord, or they're great, but if they don't come together, we will never get these things moving. And in the time span we needed, and the way we have committed to our customers. That's when we pulled everyone together, showed them the obvious, talked about the risks associated, and we talked about how it can call the death knell. So we said, take it or leave it. So 9 months from now, we don't get these things done, and this is what it is. So you tell us what to do. The moment we've created it, even though it was the most difficult piece for them to change or shift, people did quickly respond. I wouldn't say react. Today, we're all really happy when we look at every quarter on quarter what we are able to yield. In fact, when I was going around APAC, some of those difficult markets, as we would say, the moment I might meet a sales leader, I talk about business. I would talk about talent and other things later. First thing, what's the AOP? What is it? What's the market outlook? Immediately they're like, Hiranmai, I've already booked my Q1. And I'm like, okay, great, we're going to exceed. I said, all right, guys. I said, what about Q2? Some of them started telling me, Hiranmai, we've already got Q2. Some of it is in. I mean, what else do you need? That's the kind of shift. And even when we're saying PC market has shrunk, and in mature markets like Europe, and of course we had Russia and Ukraine crisis, all of us were really worried about. not just for the political and social sensitivities out there. We have employees out there in both the countries, and I was right there, and we were looking at what do we do, how do we shift it. So you work through all these matrices. So when you say matrix, it's not just one. There are hidden ones, layers and layers of, it's like peeling the onion. You think you've done it, but it just continues. It's really critical for you to know how to really stand up there, be transparent to the leaders because they have the maturity and professionalism, but start cascading down, tell them what the problem is, and create the what is in it for me. Every single one would ask that question. At the same time, you have to clearly bring them to how do you solve, what problem you're trying to solve, and do they have it in them to really go ahead and do it. So that's where I would stop.
Great. I had a specific one for you, Suresh. We are hearing this piece about, and the reason I ask you this question is knowing that you have a cross-functional view of the HR function. There is a piece about dissecting behavior in order to provide solutions. So we have heard this across, the AMD example, even the ITC example. You yourself spoke about it. How do you, as a person who brings in an outside-in perspective to the HR function, how different do you see the capabilities within the function? And is it rocket science, or is it something that it's easy to pick up to help business grow?
It's a good question. I have seen some business people, business heads coming to HR. Okay, I have some observations how they are driving HR function. They score very high in terms of understanding business, markets, customers' needs, and their ability to articulate what customer needs is much, much higher because they came from that. However, when they started heading HR function and building HR capability to drive business, I found them, very few of them are successful. That's what my observation is. When I analyzed it, why? They have great understanding of business, and they have successful stint in the business earlier. Why they could not able to add the value what we expect as a HR head. To build HR capability to support business need, there are many competencies are required. Like Kiranmai was stressing some competencies of change management. She also used a very beautiful one other important competency called building collaboration within the groups in the organization. And he was also touching about, Samit was touching about structuring, restructuring. And these competencies, a business person to understand and use that levers to drive HR function is limited for them. They are very good in driving recruitment when they started heading. And they are very good in article.
Business growth. Now, the kind of scale that you probably have experienced, are there distinctions in the services sector, and are they different from, let's say, manufacturing? Is your experience different from what Prabhakar is dealing with? Would you like to reflect on that a bit?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, I think, first of all, I think the HR competencies per se, they vary from industry to industry to a significant extent. I don't think we have still seen a huge amount, at least from an India context, we have really seen a lot of IR capability requirement in the services industry or the IT industry at this point of time. I've been part of manufacturing companies and prior to my IT stints, and there the competencies are different. So from a scalability standpoint, therefore, I think the needs are very different. For example, in a service industry today, when a potential client comes in, the HR team actually is one of the pillars of being a unique selling proposition component to win the client. Most of our clients come in, probably first-time outsourcers, who really want to understand how do we retain talent, what's the scalability, which market do we want to grow, etc. We actually front-end with the sales team right from day one of the deal to give them a context that A, what are the practices, what would they potentially see as a phase of their talent retention and growth. Sometimes when the initial work is moving, there is a significant amount of excitement within the team. There's a lot of scalability that we have. We are hiring people left, right, and center. People are excited. After a year, suddenly,